Hi, Dawe. I'm very excited about today's episode because we're going to talk about 12 tips that could make me more happy. And I always want to be more happy in life because, like, our time on earth is limited. So I'm very excited to hear what you have to say, what sort of advice you can give. So shoot, please tell me what I can do. I'll implement.
Yeah, well, I would like to bring up the concept of like what does a human being in general need to feel happy and fulfilled and safe and comfortable in life. And you have this idea of Maslow, I think, is probably the most popular, where he basically says we all have different needs. And if some of those needs are not fulfilled, we first work on them, then we work on the next layer, and then on the next layer, and then on the next layer. So in Maslow's pyramid, you first have like physical needs, like you need food, water, sleep. Then you want safety, so you want to have a roof over your head, you want to feel secure, you maybe want to have employment, you want to have access to resources, you want health. Then once you have that, you go more into belonging, like you want friendships, families, sexual intimacy. And above that, you have self-esteem. So you want to have confidence that you're good at the things you do, that you have something to contribute, that you have respect of others and respect for others. And then you can work on kind of self-actualization, like morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, etc.
So this
Now,
is kind
Tim
of a
Fleck.
hierarchical thing. So if I'm hungry, I'm not caring about these other needs because this need of being feed myself is more important than the other needs, and then I sort of won't feel these other needs until my need for being full is satisfied, and then I'll start feeling these other needs, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Tim Fletcher has, I like this Maslow model. And then Tim Fletcher, where I did the course on complex trauma, addiction, and 12 needs. He made me realize how important it really is. Because if we look at human beings, just like any other kind of creature on this planet, we all need certain things to feel happy. Like a fish needs water, it needs food, etc., etc. And humans are kind of social animals. We evolved, in tribes over, hundred thousands of years. So we have very specific needs for how we uniquely evolved as a species. And if we ignore those needs, we generally feel unhappy. Then our kind of body stops producing the hormones that we feel happy. And we become much more, well, we become depressed, anxious, and we become much more prone to addiction because we want to feel good. And if we don't feel good the natural way because we don't respect where we come from, who we are, what is important to us, it's easier to kind of fill that gap with food, with shopping, with drugs, with alcohol, with, pornography. So not understanding what we are and what we actually need in a healthy way opens us up to a lot of kind of you could say abuse or potential addictions. And yeah, so Tim Fletcher has kind of three different category of needs. So he has physical needs like food and water. He has the physical need of rest. He has the physical need of pleasure, which is like what kind of hobbies, entertainment, because he says it's actually important to be playful and have fun in life. This is how we learn, and this gives us a lot of the positive emotions and neurochemicals. And also physical affection and sexuality is part of these kind of physical needs. He says that most humans in Western society have had these physical needs met, but a lot of the emotional needs were maybe not met. And so his emotional needs are acceptance, respect, nurture, love, and comfort. So to feel safe and seen, security, safety, justice is one, then relationships and belonging, and then also purpose and significance.
So in the West,
And
we
he
don't feel the purpose and significance and belonging as much as in the less developed countries or
Yeah, it's hard to say sometimes, but you see that we have become very isolated. We have become a lot of people are living by themselves, or while often living more in groups, in kind of larger family, that in itself gives meets a lot of these social needs, while we in the West often have less of that. And
why is
another
that?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but you can see it even within ourselves, like even within the generations for us. Like maybe it's as simple as that we developed television and contraceptions. Maybe, maybe it wasn't necessarily a choice to have large families, but living in those larger families and groups did bring more, in a sense you were kind of forced to be more social because there simply were a lot more people around you.
Yeah, my
And
mother actually told me that when the television came, because they didn't have like a washing machine, they didn't have a refrigerator, they didn't have a car. But when the television came around, then people stopped just popping by, you know?
yeah,
People just stayed home to watch television.
yeah,
And now we have these screens that we are stuck to like most of the time. So we don't even talk to the people next to us.
exactly.
Mm.
So, and you can ask yourself if that doesn't contribute to this kind of, loneliness epidemic, anxiety, depression epidemic. But what's also interesting is that Tim Fletcher mentions beauty as one of the 12 needs. So he says it's very important that we surround ourselves with beautiful things, with beautiful experiences. And it has been proven that if you are in a beautiful area and often, in nature, for example, it actually regulates our emotional brain. So our nervous system gets more regulated. It gets calmer if it's surrounded by beautiful things. So if you see a beautiful building, beautiful architecture, beautiful nature, a beautiful garden, paintings, art, a piece of music, all these things actually help. And I thought it was very interesting because sometimes in our society, we kind of neglect this beauty, or at least I did for a while. And it's actually really interesting to be very conscious to add beauty to your surroundings.
I
And
think
then he
that
said,
that's very relevant nowadays. I don't know if you have noticed the organization called the Arkitekturopprøret, or which works against the ugly architecture. And they
yeah,
also have a television program about that because the city development is about mostly of profit and building very
yeah,
small apartments. That doesn't really make us more social because they ignore the meeting places or the common areas
yeah,
where you could meet for free.
yeah,
So, we are sort of driven by this profit and competition logic, which makes
yeah.
us miserable because it divides us and atomizes us instead of bringing us together. And I
And
think
it,
it's the need of beauty, I think is completely overseen. So I totally agree with you. It's like it's a luxury if we engage in that. Maybe it's a hobby for yourself, but then
yeah,
maybe it's yeah, like a deep human need. I think in indigenous societies, they always made art. It's not even
exactly.
though they were threatened by uh, animals and snakes and bears and everything, they took the time to to make beautiful things.
Yeah, and even nature itself does it. Like nature puts beauty in everything. So it's such a fundamental thing. And when I heard that it actually regulates the nervous system, it really clicked for me.
Mm.
Like it's not luxury. It literally makes you more peaceful, more happy, more rested. So to be surrounded by beautiful things is mentally healthy for you. So it's in a sense you could say to build a lot of ugly buildings is actually contributing to the mental ill and wellness of your population and your citizens.
But this
So maybe
connects
that
it.
could be a good argument.
It is, and you have the discussion about whether or not we should use the happiness index instead of the GDP because we're
Yeah,
driven by short-term profit concerns, which makes us build cities and societies that is detrimental to us as humans and the 12 needs that you are talking about.
Yeah, and just to round those off, like there's three left. So Tim Fletcher also talks about what he calls spiritual needs,
Ah,
and one of them is awe. So these, it's a bit connected to beauty, but it's a bit different as well. So awe are kind of experiences that take us out of ourselves. So it kind of transcends our personal boundary. So, for example, if you are on top of the mountain and you suddenly have the beautiful view, that can leave us in awe. Or we see a documentary about deep sea creatures, about weird things we never knew before. Or we have a look at the stars and we see the Milky Way. All those things that inspire awe, that is also a basic, one of the basic 12 needs he says, because those experiences to kind of transcend ourselves contribute to happiness, and we need that in our lives to feel good.
I
And then,
actually think I have first-hand experience with that because I once rented an Airbnb where they sort of had exploited the possibility to build sort of this shack into an apartment. And if you looked out of the window, it was like half a meter into just this brick wall or
yeah,
cement wall. So I mean, it made me just instantly depressed. And
right,
and I notice when I look at the mountains or the sea, it calms me. So I think this is something that everybody can connect with as a need.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is why we like going out in nature, why we like to do hikes, why maybe some people like to go fishing because they're in the beautiful, you have the beautiful water running around. And then the next one is what he calls connection to a higher power. Now, this can be religious, but it can also be, just from a scientific point of view, the amazingness of the complicatedness of how the universe is connected, and that we somehow feel connected to that. So we can do that by meditation, by prayer, by whatever, but to feel connected to something higher than ourselves, a higher power, God, source, all that is an important need. And then the last one is kind of how he calls it, the if our other 11 needs are met, then we generally tend to feel happy, content, satisfied, and whole. So if you meet the earlier 11 needs, then you kind of get this, how do you call it, this last stone that tops it all off, and you generally feel good and happy and content about yourself.
What
And
is this
what I
last need? I didn't really get the
well,
last
he,
need.
he basically calls it happy, content, satisfied, whole. So a sense of wholeness might be best described. I think you would describe it a bit as transcendence within the model of Maslow, where you kind of transcend the self. You become aware of your unity with the universe in a sense. However, that here's for you, or enlightenment more from the East,
Okay, so
you
it's
could
it's
say.
it's a one step further from spirituality.
You could say so, yeah. I think spirituality is the path towards this
Yeah.
attainment. You could say that this could be understanding your true self, your true nature. I think this is what they refer to in the East as enlightenment, cessation, and maybe in the West more becoming one with God, if you could say it that way.
Yeah.
And what he basically says, and they use this a lot in his program, and this is why I like it. Like um, instead of, for example, just chasing money, you can actually now look at what are my 12 different needs, and can I put my time, effort, and talents into seeing what need is the least met at the moment, and can I get more of that? And I think that's very healthy, because I think as a Western, growing up in Western society, I was very much trained into this materialistic paradigm where basically the only path to happiness is wealth, maybe fame. And while this is much more seeing what human beings actually are and what we need. And by reinvesting your time and effort in meeting these 12 needs, then according to him, and I definitely feel it has been true to me to a large degree, he says if you meet these needs, then you get if you couple it back to the neurobiology, this is when you get the dopamine.
The
This is when you
rewards.
get
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And if those rewards are being given, then you generally feel happy. So if your needs are met, you generally feel happy. Now, if your needs aren't met, you generally feel unhappy. So you can use this the other way around as well. Like if I feel very depressed or anxious or unhappy, okay, let's have a look at the needs. I think they have a nice website called 12needs.com where you can do like a 5-minute test, which needs are being met at the moment and which are not. And they have a lot of tips as well, like, okay, maybe I should be a bit more social. What could I do? Can I send a message to a friend? Can I reach out? Can I make a phone call? Can I invite somebody over? Or as you said, like I'm in this ugly Airbnb and I'm just getting depressed from watching at the wall. Well, what can you do? Maybe you can buy a nice plant or
yeah.
get a beautiful painting, or so you can, in this way, you can kind of add and focus on meeting these 12 needs for yourself. And also you can
Very
help other
useful.
people meet those needs. Yeah, I found it one of the best models available because if we as humanity would focus our talents and skills and energies on meeting these 12 needs for ourselves and each other, I think we would generally build a much healthier and saner and happier society.
Yeah, definitely. I think that will be interesting to talk about how we can, like in the next episode, about how we can build a society based on fulfilling these needs in people.
Yeah.
Yes. But one question, not everyone feels this spiritual need. I've been talking to a lot of people that do not feel a need for a spiritual connection and they have not been in contact with a spiritual connection. Then what can they do? Does it mean that they necessarily aren't happy?
Well, it could be that they might be a bit stuck in one of the earlier needs. So maybe they feel very unhappy about some of their relationships, or maybe they are meeting spiritual needs in a way that maybe we don't understand. Like it doesn't necessarily need to look like meditation and yoga and breath work. It could also maybe simply be, walking the dog and feeling the sun on your skin and just kind of feeling unity with that experience. So it's sometimes hard to say what people call spiritual and not, but I think you could say it's one of the later on needs. So it's one of those needs that obviously if you don't have food and water, if you don't have a roof over your head, or if you don't feel that you're accepted and safe, you probably won't go immediately to spirituality. But if most of those other needs are met, I think for a lot of people, spirituality will become a need. Let's put it this way. Like but it's in the hierarchy of Maslow. It's definitely one of the kind of the higher needs. It's the self-actualization, self-transcendence need.
But then I
And
have like a question because does it mean that if you have some problems in your relation, you're not in contact with your spirituality necessarily? Or for example, let's say you're a hunter-gatherer and you're constantly being under threat from wild animals and stuff. Does it mean you still mean that you can't have a spiritual connection? Because like I think the spiritual connection is pretty strong in some of these indigenous societies, and they definitely lived a more dangerous life than us.
well, in a way, I mean, it's a question, but also this is also why, this is kind of a criticism on Maslow's model, right? Because some people might not have a roof over their head, but they feel very connected to their creator, or they have a very high spiritual connection. Anyway, a lot of the monks, they don't necessarily have a lot of material wealth, but they do have this very strong spiritual connection. So where Maslow says you first need the kind of the physical stuff, then the safety, then the relations, then the self-esteem, then the self-actualization and self-transcendence. Maybe that's true, maybe not. Um, you can also look at the 12 needs of Tim Fletcher, where he doesn't really have a hierarchy, because I think sometimes, especially if people are very struggling, to have a connection with the spiritual, with your divinity, can be a great support and can give a lot of belonging.
Think
So
about
it's
the
a bit hard
slaves
to
in the
say.
US. Think about the slaves in the US. I mean, they had a super hard time, but they were also, connecting to their spirituality to help them, and through art, through singing, through community, they sort of survived. So, it's for me, it's like hard to see this as a hierarchy.
Exactly. And this is like one of the criticisms on Maslow's model. And I think that's right. So I don't really know what it is for me. And for me, sometimes needs shift a bit as well. Sometimes I have a period where I have much more desire to be more social, and other times I want to be more by myself and in nature and connect more with nature and kind of spirituality. And what you said about hunter-gatherers, in a way, maybe what you say is right, but in another way, I think the hunter-gatherers had a lot more of their emotional and social needs met than we do, because you work together in tribes, you provide safety for each other, you hunt together, you gather food together, you travel together through nature, so you experience this beauty and awe and pleasure. You make music together, you are around a campfire together, you make art together. So there's a lot more interconnection in those tribes. And if those needs are met, you could say then, and you didn't have a television, right? So there's nothing to distract you and you see the stars. So
Yeah,
I think,
you don't live through the screen only. And
exactly, I think,
that's pushing your addictive patterns.
yeah. And I mean, especially in Norway, we still feel very connected to the campfire, right? We still like to be out around the campfire, look at the stars, talk together. I think that still touches us on a very deep level because we've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years.
But I think it's sort of a paradox that we're pushing this digital agenda where people, even though they go to the food store, they can meet nobody. Like some people are lonely and the only highlight in their day was to talk about the person working in the supermarket. Now
Yeah.
that's not even possible. So, all this digitalization and using of screens all the time instead of the interface with other people, it's sort of the atomizing us maybe, and bringing us away from that basic need, that basic social need of other people,
Yeah.
of being with other people.
Yeah, and it's hard to say to point exactly to this or that, but I watched this documentary like The Birth Gap. And basically, apart from some countries in sub-Saharan Africa, most of our evolved societies are dying out because we're not having children at replacement rate. So there's a lot, like in most societies today, there are less 0 year olds than there are 30-year olds. And I don't know who mentioned it, but I think in Norway there are now more 65 plus people than 0 to 20 people. So you have this situation where, because of maybe a lot of basic needs being met, but all these emotional, social needs not being met, is that people all are isolated. And I think this is where a lot of the anxiety comes from, where a lot of the depression comes from,
Yeah, Tinder's
where,
destroyed our our dating life, and
yeah,
from what I heard, I think that's a myth. Like in Japan, they don't have sex anymore. I don't know if that's
yeah, it's
true.
hard to say. But I think if you look at the birth gap, I think South Korea is the worst. Like
Very
they
stressful
yeah,
society.
like super high stress. And, I'm always a bit double in this because I was taught, like, well, the biggest problem is that we are with too many humans. So
Oh,
maybe it's okay if our numbers go down a bit and we have a bit less and we learn to live in more harmony with nature. But it's also an interesting, I thought it was a very interesting documentary where they say, like, okay, but how are you going to do it with a lot of the social systems that basically are functioning on passing the problem to the next generations? Like, how are you going to care for all the elderly people, and how are you going to maintain a society? And yeah, it's hard to say. I think we'll figure it out, but Yeah.
Yeah. And now we don't want the immigrants either. So,
Right? Yeah,
yeah.
it's
But I have one more question because
yeah,
we have this self-image that we are more developed than other societies. And maybe it's the other way around because, like, what are we producing? We're producing more and more inequality with these tech oligarchs that
yeah.
have no they have no kindness. Like they're these autistic people that just want to hoard wealth and go to Mars and just safeguard themselves, and they don't give a shit about the rest of humanity. It's like this is what our society produces, and it's not very social. And what is sort of confusing me a little bit is that these people they use these manifesting techniques. They sort of use some aspects of spirituality to understand that they can, you know, they don't care about what other people think about them. They manifest wealth. They do what is needed to have other people support them in that. So they definitely have extracted some parts of the spiritual truth. And then the part that is about kindness, oneness, we are one, we are, a social species. Like if you are sad, I am sad. This is totally absent. So these are
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
really, I
it's
can't really grasp this. I mean, it's taking us down as a humanity because we're destroying nature with this extraction of from nature and it's destroying, like we only have dogs left, of all the animals, they will be extinct and the biodiversity is plummeting. So, I mean, this is taking us down as a human species and
yeah,
yeah, can
it's
you
hard
have,
to
do you have
well, it's a super broad subject, right? And I don't know. I think it's hard to read into the motivations of other people. In a way, it's also natural to, want to kind of expand humanity to multiple planets. I think that's within this idea of surviving and thriving as a species. And we kind of co-created, right? I mean, obviously there's a lot of things. What I find really sad is that I find both the internet and a lot of social media were actually much more functional and useful 15, 20 years ago than they are now. Like when Facebook started, it was a lot more fun and social than now. I think I have so much ads now. But this is also a bit like I don't know where the problem is. I think maybe it's like one person's problem, or are these just dynamics of a system where we have a monetary system that kind of demands to optimize profit? And obviously, that will go at the cost of humans, of nature, or it isn't always balanced. And sometimes we really all like something, so we go on it and then we experience, and then we start to experience the negative sides of it as well. And then we need to reevaluate and readjust. Do we want to make adjustments? And hopefully we'll do that in time. But like I know some people that have kind of gone back to much simpler phones, for example, because they noticed that indeed they didn't like it, and they didn't like the dating culture either. But it's also sometimes so hard to say, like you get kind of locked into these systems, like, and I'm not always sure if yeah, it's hard to say what does, but we can always make individual choices and keep communicating about those choices and then inspire others to make healthier choices as well. But I think it's a bit too simple to just kind of blame one external person, because if we wouldn't be using these platforms, they wouldn't have the power and the wealth either.
But
But
then again,
maybe,
these devices are addictive, and
yeah,
we
yeah,
build
completely.
societies that makes us unhappy,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
primes
but this
us to use these devices because we're unhappy, and then we're unhappy, so we just share a lot of negative stuff.
Yeah, yeah, but this is kind of the interesting, or also the sad thing. Like, especially if you build a society that is, I think our Western society and maybe our global society seems to be organized mostly by profit and capitalism. And the idea that that works out always to the benefit of all people and the planet, that does not make any sense at all. Like, why would it? It's just one metric you're looking at. And this is also why I think focusing on these 12 needs would be a much healthier system. Maybe you mentioned it before, or we mentioned it yesterday, like this Happy Planet Index. Instead of following the GDP, you're looking at what brings happiness to a population. And you can do different metrics. But the problem with our money system is that it is so powerful. So the people that make the money, they can simply buy up the media, they can simply buy up the politicians.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
they're not interested
we
in your happiness index, the index, because it will lessen their profits.
exactly. And this is where it gets, but this is not only social media, this has been for ages. Like this is where all addictive substances kind of, you could say that it's in their, they would make higher profits if we are unhappy. And instead of having our needs met in a healthy way, we go to addictions because that's where they profit from. And this is also something that we need to be aware of, and why I think you need to be very active with understanding your 12 needs. And you need to put effort into maintaining them.
Yeah.
Because if you don't maintain them, you will become unhappy, and then it's very easy these days to slide into addictions, whether it is alcohol, gambling, social media, be behind your computer all the time. So it's, yeah, it's a very dynamic process.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about here because you have the food system, you have the health care system, which doesn't care about the causes of your illness. We had this debate series, which we call Sustainability Now, where we discuss these things. It's on the internet. I can link to it in
Yeah,
the show
yeah, it would
notes.
be great.
But what I think is a little bit scary nowadays is that we have a tendency of bigger and bigger monopolies. So it's not like we have competitions between small businesses. We have bigger and bigger companies, and these richest individuals and companies in the United States, three individuals are richer than 165 people from the middle class in the US.
Yeah.
And then what you see also because of the technology, you're more and more able to control. You have control systems, so you can control people, and through the media also. So I see this from post-COVID. We and in COVID, we sort of I see tendencies of totalitarianism. You can see this even in
Yeah,
the world
totally.
leaders of today. The free speech. Research is under pressure, and it scares me. I don't know where this will end because it's not going in the direction of more democracy, moving towards more sustainability, more happiness for everyone. It's like it's not moving in that direction.
No, it well, it I think I agree with you, but also I think we have been living in systems that have been here for a long time, but they were covered up with this kind of layer of, oh, you live in a democracy, your vote matters. So I'm not sure if we're really moving into a problem, or if actually a lot of the dysfunctional systems are only now being seen for reality, so we can actually start changing them. And this is also the thing with technology. Like, I think nothing is, kind of black or white. Everything has advantages and disadvantages. And maybe you can use new technologies to increase the survival of yourself or your community or all of humanity, or, live in more harmony with the planet. Like, for me, it's much easier to share, for example, permaculture videos over the whole planet. And I've seen beautiful examples where China is regreening an area, the size of Belgium, and India has solved the water problems of 1,000 villages with using techniques similar in permaculture by doing top-down water harvesting. And in that way, all these things can be a huge benefit as well. But at the same time, I think it has a lot to do with our personal human development as well. And And obviously, I think it's dangerous when you get these monopolies. And, but and yeah, I think we're just trying to figure it out as humanity. And I hope that as long as you can have kind of open conversations and people are willing to um, talk honestly, and if they don't like it, that they are willing to say no as well. That's also very important. Like if we don't give our consent to things, if everybody kind of deletes their Facebook and Instagram tomorrow,
We have power.
exactly, well, the kind of the wealth and the power they have obviously also evaporates. But yeah, it's hard to say. These are like huge questions, and this is also why I like the 12 needs. It gives me something to focus back on. Like this is something I can control. And yeah, you can invite your neighbors, you can make a call to your friends, you can take a walk in nature. These are all things that you have some control of.
The debate now that you've seen with the cows that they want to give Bovaes this sort of substance that make them fart less to save
Yeah.
the planet. It's just nobody wants to
Yeah.
buy their milk anymore.
No,
So
but
it's
it
like a
also
powerful
seems,
way of showing that, okay, we think this is bullshit.
yeah. Yeah. And it's also like, I really like to look at things holistically, like the interrelations between things. And kind of what we talked about earlier, like look at the feelings and needs of people, and that includes nature as well. And yeah, I don't know, I often find that the West produces a lot of very much what you said before as well, like kind of the suppression of symptoms. So we only, if there is a problem, we look at the symptom and we try to suppress that instead of looking at where does the problem actually come from. Like, for example, this loneliness epidemic. Anxiety goes up, depression goes up, suicide might go up. And what do? We try to give people pharmaceutical medication instead of looking at, hey, how are your relationships doing? How do you feel in your society? Do you feel you can make an useful contribution? Do you feel connected with the environment, with the people around you? While if you would actually change things there, a bit what you said before, like how can we meet? How can we make places in town so people can meet? So it's also like, where do you try to solve these things?
Yeah, and like you said, it's not only the physical meeting places because but I really think that's important that we meet in person. But yesterday I was sort of a little bit down and then we met to talk about the video podcast and we had the conversation during the episode and it made me in a lot better mood. So you can
Yeah,
also connect with people digitally. That has helped me and is helping
yeah,
me. Yeah. So about
yeah,
technology also, technology is of course neutral. So, but I'm very excited. I'm not excited. I'm sort of I think it's doom and gloom nowadays with when you see the news and the wars and the tech oligarchs and all the evil things that happen with the Epstein and people just thinking about how they can get more for themselves. Like the ego is
yeah,
super big. So I just want to ask you, because we're approaching the end of the episode also, some people have talked about, there's sort of two forces. There's the ego, rising of the ego, and then you have these other more wise part of the human being that is sort of struggling also to to spread into people's heart and awaken them. Uh,
yeah,
because if we all have our 12 needs met, if we all, connect with the with our spiritual higher self, then
yeah,
maybe we're not so aggressive anymore. Like we've talked about also in these episodes, how, when we can feel aggression and when we start to look at that aggression and maybe we can come in contact with what is really the problem. So I just
yeah.
wanted to ask you, um, do you have any reflections on that? How can we be, as a species, as a humanity, go and, connect more with our higher selves? And will that help?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I think personally, but this might be just a narrative to keep myself sane. But I think because of a lot of things we went through, it has become easier to, for example, meet our need for water and food than it was like 200 years ago. Now we have water from the tap and we have food in the supermarkets. And I feel a bit the same with, for example, what I personally really liked with, this internet opening up is that the discussion of IDs and the access to IDs has become so huge. Like if 100 years ago you were born in India, you probably only were introduced to one set of beliefs and ideas. If you grew up in Norway, you probably would only be exposed to one set of ideas and beliefs. And now, I can learn about Tibetan Buddhism. I can learn about shamanism from South America. I can go into non-duality. I can learn about, there's so much knowledge available these days that and I like to believe that that helps. I think that helps along our evolution because it becomes a bit silly to, in our days, and it's maybe also a bit scary, but it becomes a bit silly to think that you are somehow the only best person on the planet. So I think that's more and more proven not to be true, or to believe that your tribe or your culture has somehow only found the good answers. And I think there's a lot of, if we can open ourselves up to it, we suddenly have access to this experience from all cultures that all survived over, thousands, 10 thousands of years. And they all had, in one way, we all have kind of the same basic needs, but in another way, we all found our own solutions to it. And if we can sort through them and kind of preserve the best ones, then I think it could enrich every human being on the planet. And I like to believe in that narrative that there is some kind of evolution of our collective going on as well. And that the more integrated we get as humanity on the planet, that the more we can develop individually, and then maybe also open up to other civilizations from other planets. That's where I kind of keep my focus, to keep myself kind of happy, and to believe that we're in one way are progressing as a species.
So you think that collectively we could think about ourselves as a collective that will that needs to satisfy our 12 needs also, like for example as a planet, as a collective of 8 billion people, we need to look at our 12 needs and uh,
I think
but I
that's yeah.
but
And
I mean
if you
I
do
think
it
that
from a kind of a grown-up perspective, like if you instead of thinking like, oh, this person is from a different tribe, so I'm superior, so I get the right to kill these people and just take their resources, instead of acting like that kind of tribal consciousness, if you can imagine like, hey, this is a person just like me. We all have our 12 basic needs. They have met them in certain ways. I have met mine in certain ways. What can we learn from each other? And instead of fighting each other, how can we meet our own needs and other people's needs? And, this is a bit what Gandhi said and Buckminster Fuller. There are plenty of resources to kind of make everybody have a pretty decent life. And if we would stop kind of hurting ourselves and each other, we could only generate more of that. We could generate more beauty. We could generate more harmony within ourselves, within our cultures, within the human collective, within how we live on a planet, in harmony with nature. So I think there's definitely room for a lot of improvement, because good ideas can spread very easily now as well.
but where
But
in the model does this kindness reside? Is it like on every level, or is it only, I mean, you can can you be like spiritual and egotistical and evil? I mean, can you be
Yeah,
very advanced on the relational level and not be in contact with your spirituality and still be, more kinder than the one that is more? Isn't it Ken Wilber that talks about this?
yeah, I was gonna say this is kind of Ken Wilber who has like different stages. He has like one is waking up, which is more about realizing your true self or not. But you also have a psychological growing up. And he basically says that you can be fully enlightened, but if you do that from a psychological perspective that is still quite tribal, then you believe that your God is the only God that leads to enlightenment. So you're gonna approach it from this very tribal perspective. While if you first grow to a more world-centric stage where you see that every person has their own strategies to meet their own needs, and this includes their spiritual needs. So we all have a different interpretation of how we express our connection with a higher power. Then, once you get enlightened in that state, you say, oh, I found a path to get enlightened, but most likely other people will find their own paths as well. I can share mine, but I'm not going to pretend that mine is somehow the only path or the path that everyone else should follow as well.
So now you sort of tore down the hierarchy in Maslow's pyramid because yeah, I mean, Ken Wilber does that. And you can have people that can access the spiritual powers and then they can do a lot of things, but they can also do a lot of damage in that case. In my books, I write about how you can sort of find your power. You can
Yep.
find your power, but if it doesn't come from a balanced place, you can do a lot of damage. Maybe
And what do
that's what's
you?
happening today with the world leaders because maybe they're not very developed emotionally, but they're
Oh,
in
definitely. Yeah.
they are in contact with some spiritual powers, and then they can do a lot of damage.
And what do you recommend in your books? Like, what could people do to get in that balance?
Well, I actually don't get into I'm not talking about the individual development of self. I'm talking about social sustainability, which is a lot about kindness, which is a lot about creating this environment that you're talking about that will make us thrive, like
Yeah,
build cities for us to thrive, support the small sustainable businesses through buying from them. So I have a lot of concrete advice on how you can build a society that would support our development. But I'm not talking about the inner world.
no,
And
okay,
if it
fair enough.
starts with the inner world, that needs to be another book.
Yeah,
But I've sort of started that, be a leader in your own life and connect with others to create a better world. But
yeah,
then, if you're a destructive person, you can also create change, but maybe not for the better. And you
yeah,
have to be a wise person. And that I didn't talk about, I didn't go that micro in my books.
yeah,
But I'm talking about social sustainability, and I use that as a concept for talking about how we're social beings, how we should care about each other. So kindness is definitely a very important part of my books. They are both about social
yeah,
sustainability, which is, the way we've taken interpreted the social the sustainability goals is more like green growth. It's more like
yeah,
more growth for me. We left out the kindness aspect of sustainability, which is what I'm trying to pick up and say, hey, remember, we also need to be kind because we have to
yeah,
be kind to nature. We have to be kind to other people. That's sort of, the level where I'm going into this in my books.
yeah,
But I definitely think there's a need to talk about the even deeper aspects of our psychology, but and even go even deeper into the spiritual realm, because or the psychological realm about the trauma and the messages that our subconscious can convey to us. But that is its own topic that we might
yeah,
discuss in another episode because
yeah,
you
yeah.
can't talk about everything at the same time.
No, no, fair enough.
Yeah.
Is
Do you
there
want
anything? Yeah, is there anything left you feel we haven't touched for this episode? Or
Each time we are talking about a topic, I feel that there's a need to discuss more and more. And we
Yeah.
just can't start that conversation in this episode because we don't have more time. So I guess both talking about the societal the like go one level up from the individual, from the micro, and talk about how can we solve this on a collective level, which is sort of what I'm writing about. So I'm very excited about our next episode where we're going to talk about that. But I would really
Perfect.
also want to go into the spiritual realm and the psychological realm and how we can open up to listen to our higher selves and our subconscious mind. That I would really love that also. So it means we
Yeah,
have two more episodes we need to
exactly.
choose.
We have plenty to talk about. That's beautiful.
Yeah, so let's end this episode for today because we don't have more time now. And thank
Indeed.
you for
Thank you.
listening if you were listening.